Ever found yourself in a pickle with algebra equations? Well, you're not alone. Algebra, the branch of mathematics that deals with symbols and the rules for manipulating those symbols, often leaves many scratching their heads. Yet despite its complexities, algebra is a crucial tool that we use in various aspects of life. It's the secret ingredient behind the working of your favorite video game, the calculations for your next road trip, or even the prediction of the next solar eclipse. But let's face it, grappling with X's and Y's can sometimes feel like deciphering an alien language. The mere sight of an algebra equation can trigger a brain freeze for some. But what if we told you that solving these equations can be as straightforward as tying your shoelaces? So buckle up. Today, we'll unpack the process of solving algebra equations, making it a breeze for you. Algebra equations might seem daunting at first, but they're just puzzles waiting to be solved. Now let's dive into the world of these puzzles and explore some of the basic elements that make up algebra equations. First up, we have variables. Variables are the letters in the equation like x, y, or z. They're the unknowns, the pieces of the puzzle we're trying to find. Next we have constants. Constants are the numbers in the equation that do not change. There are fixed points, our anchors. For example, in the equation 5x plus 3 equals 23, 5 and 3 are constants. Then we have coefficients. Coefficients are the numbers that are multiplied by the variables. In our previous example, 5 is the coefficient of x. It tells us how many times we multiply our variable. Now let's talk about expressions. An expression is a combination of variables, constants, and coefficients that are connected by mathematical operations such as addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division. So, in our example, 5x plus 3 is an expression. Finally, we come to the concept of equality. That's what the equal sign in the equation represents. It's the balance beam that holds our equation together. It tells us that the expression on one side of the equation has the same value as the expression on the other side. Now here's the most important thing. When solving algebra equations, we need to maintain this balance. If we add something to one side, we have to add the same thing to the other side. If we subtract something from one side, we have to subtract the same thing from the other side. It's all about keeping the scales balanced. So we have our variables, constants, coefficients, expressions, and the all-important concept of equality. These are the basic elements of algebra equations. Understanding these elements is like having a map to navigate the world of algebra. Remember, the key to solving any algebra equation lies in understanding these fundamental elements. Now that we've got the basics down, it's time to roll up our sleeves and get to solving. Algebra equations can seem intimidating, but don't fret. They're just like puzzles waiting to be solved. And like any good puzzle, there's a method to the madness. So let's dive in. First things first, simplifying the equation. This step is all about making your equation as straightforward as possible. Combine like terms on both sides of the equation. If you see 4x's on one side and 3x's on the other, combine them to get 1x. If there are numbers, add or subtract them as necessary. The goal here is to make the equation cleaner and easier to handle. But what if you have fractions in your equation? Don't worry, just multiply every term by the same number to get rid of the fraction. This might make your numbers bigger, but it will make the equation much simpler to work with. Remember, we're after simplicity here. Next, we move on to isolating the variable. This is the heart of solving any algebra equation. We want to get our variable, let's say x, all by itself on one side of the equation. How do we do this? By doing the exact opposite operation to both sides of the equation. If x is being multiplied by a number, we divide. If x is being subtracted, we add. The key here is balance. What we do to one side, we must do to the other. Now we're almost there. We've simplified our equation and we've got x all by itself. But we're not done yet. We need to check our work. This is a crucial step that's often overlooked, but it can save you from sneaky mistakes. Take your solution and plug it back into the original equation. If both sides of the equation balance out, congratulations, you've successfully solved your algebra equation. Before we wrap up, let's talk about some common pitfalls to avoid. Remember to always simplify your equation first. It can be tempting to jump right in and start solving, but taking a moment to simplify can save you a lot of headaches later on. Also, don't forget to check your work. It's easy to make a small mistake that throws off your entire solution. Double-checking your work can catch these errors before they cause trouble. And there you have it, a step-by-step guide to solving algebra equations. It might seem a bit daunting at first, but with practice it will become second nature. Just remember to simplify, isolate, and validate. With these steps, you should be able to tackle any algebra equation that comes your way. Let's put theory into practice and solve some algebra equations together. First off, let's start with a simple one, shall we? Consider the equation x plus 5 equals 10. To solve this, we need to isolate x. How do we do that? We subtract 5 from both sides of the equation, and voila, x equals 5. Simple, right? Now let's notch up the complexity a bit. Consider this equation, 2x plus 3 equals 11. Here we first subtract 3 from both sides to isolate the term with x. This gives us 2x equals 8. Now to find the value of x, we divide both sides by 2, resulting in x equals 4. One of the challenges you might face while solving these equations is dealing with negative numbers. But don't worry, remember, a negative times a negative gives a positive. Let's see this in action. Consider the equation, negative 3x equals negative 9. Dividing both sides by negative 3, we get x equals 3. Let's move on to a bit more complex equation, 4x plus 2 equals 2x plus 12. Here we have x terms on both sides of the equation. So first let's get all the x terms on one side by subtracting 2x from both sides. This gives us 2x plus 2 equals 12. Now we subtract 2 from both sides to isolate the x term, resulting in 2x equals 10. Finally, we divide both sides by 2 to find x equals 5. Sometimes you might come across equations with fractions. Don't let them intimidate you. Let's solve one together. Consider the equation, 1/2 x equals 4. To solve this, we multiply both sides by 2 to get rid of the fraction. This gives us x equals 8. And what about equations with brackets? Let's tackle one. Suppose we have the equation, 2 times the quantity x plus 3 equals 14. First, we divide both sides by 2, resulting in x plus 3 equals 7. Then, we subtract 3 from both sides and we find x equals 4. You might also face equations with more than one variable. For example, 3x plus 4y equals 12. In such cases, you need another equation to solve for the variables. But we'll delve into that in another video. The key to solving algebra equations is to remember the basic rules of algebra and apply them systematically. If you ever get stuck, go back to your basic operations. Addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, and see how they can help you simplify the equation. Most importantly, practice as much as you can. See, with a bit of practice, solving algebra equations can actually be quite fun. Alright, time to wrap things up and recap what we've learned today. We started off by introducing the fascinating world of algebra, a branch of mathematics that uses letters and symbols to represent numbers and relationships. We then moved on to the basic elements of algebra equations, understanding the crucial role played by variables, constants, coefficients, and operators. Next, we delved into a comprehensive step-by-step guide to solving algebra equations. We learned that each step, from simplifying expressions to isolating the variable, is essential in the solution process. We also put our knowledge to the test with some practical examples, demonstrating that algebra is not just an abstract concept, but a useful tool for solving real-world problems. In essence, algebra is like a puzzle. It might seem daunting at first, but once you get the hang of it, it becomes a fun and satisfying challenge. Remember, practice makes perfect. So go ahead and solve some algebra equations. You've got this.